So welcome to all of our panelists, to all of our audience here to our roundtable of the conference on infrastructures in the Southern Caucasus. My name is Helena Holzberger. I'm an assistant professor at LMU Munich at the Chair of Russian Asia Studies. And together with my colleague Apire Marrero, we planned and organized our last 2 days conference. We are very happy. We had a cooperation with Yerevan State University and also with American University. And so we want to close up our conference with a roundtable. So the last 1.5 days we discussed the history of infrastructures, and now we want to create infrastructures. And that's why we planned to have a discussion with many panelists. You will see why it was still a good idea to have a big podium. Unfortunately, the audience cannot be as big as planned because of the devastating current situation. Many researchers obviously are occupied with many other things now. So we are getting recorded, so please always speak in the microphone. And of course, you agree with the recording. First of all, I would like to introduce our participants. Sandra Dahlke is a historian for Eastern European history and since 2018, head of the Max Weber Foundation in Moscow. Her own research focuses on the history of late imperial Russia and the Soviet Union. Among many other publications, she is the author of a monograph of Emilian Jaroslavsky. Oliver Reisner, here next to me, is professor in European and Caucasian Studies at Ilia State University, Tbilisi. He is also a board member of the Association of European Studies for the Caucasus. He has several research interests, plenty of international cooperations, and many publications, among them a monograph on Georgian nationalism. Edita Gosyan is currently the Deputy Scientific Director at the Armenian Genocide Museum in Yerevan. She is also a senior researcher at the Center for Scientific Information and Analysis and Monitoring, Institute for Informatics and Automation Problems. Her research interests include the legal and historical aspects of Armenian genocide, comparative genocide studies, and the history of the Armenian Republic and scientometrics. Andreas Renner, in the middle, is a historian of Eastern Europe and holds the chair of Russian Asian Studies at the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich. His research is focused on the history of the Russian Pacific, the Arctic, Russian-Japanese relations, and the history of medicine. His latest forthcoming monograph is a history of the Northeast Passage. Bahram Matevosyan is a historian at the AUA, specialized in foreign and security policies of Turkey and the South Caucasus states. He has among many other international publications. He is the author of the monograph Turkey, Kemalism and the Soviet Union: Problems of Modernization, Ideology and Interpretation. Tamar Keburia is PhD candidate in history in a joint program of Ilia State University and the German University of Göttingen. She was a fellow at several European universities where she gained deep insight into Western European academia. Vahang Pogosyan is co-founder of Instigate, a group of high-tech companies in Armenia, and of Instigate Academy, a research triangle which brings together needs of corporate and government customers, research capabilities from academia, and product management capabilities from industry, specialized in system design, digital informations, and management systems. We asked our panelists to prepare short statements on specific topics regarding academic infrastructure between Western and South Caucasian scholars and academic institutions. Sandra, we would appreciate hearing about the plans of Max Weber Foundation to decentralize from Moscow to local offices, especially in the Southern Caucasus, and your opinion on the shift from Russian to peripheral archives that we all witnessing in the last 1.5 years.
Hello. Hello to everybody. I'm very happy that I can be here with you and to be a participant of this very interesting and high prolific workshop today. Thank you to Pien and Helena to having organized such an event, and I think we are all very well aware of the terrific situation Armenia is now facing, but I think it's even more important that we keep on working and that we continue to our scientific cooperation, that they will be even more important in the future. Let me start to tell you a little bit about the Max Weber Foundation, because I think that not everybody of you knows what the Max Weber Foundation is. The Max Weber Foundation is a publicly funded foundation who is the who's the umbrella organization of 11 institutes, research institutes in the humanities and the social science abroad. And most of these institutes had been founded in countries with which Germany was at war with. And I've been the director, I'm currently the director of the German Historical Institute in Moscow. And you can guess that we're in a very difficult situation now, and we scale down because of the war, the Russian aggression against Ukraine. We will scale down our work in Moscow, but we try to keep our library open, but we don't have any academic programs anymore in Russia. I think that our discipline that means East European and Eurasian history and similar disciplines already a couple of years ago are very well aware of the fact that we had in the past been too much concentrating our work towards Russia, Imperial Russia, and the Soviet Union with a perspective which was centered toward the centers of empires. I think this was a very important research period for all of us, because only after the collapse of the Soviet Union in Germany, and I think that's true for Western Europe also, we get an awareness of the fact that the Soviet Union was a multinational, multi-ethnic empire, and that the Russian Empire was not Russian but multi-ethnic. It seems ridiculous to us now, but in the past, I think that we started to think about beginning with very important books of Andreas Kappeler. And
He's Swiss by origin and not German. Huh?
yes, he's Swiss, but he worked at Cologne as a German professor, and but in academia, structures are very heavy and very slow in adapting to new challenges. That means that the most of the professorships in Germany were specialized in Soviet history and in the history of the Russian Empire, and we have not. There are some specialists of the other republics and the other nations of the imperial period, but there are fewer than those specialists working purely on Soviet history and imperial history. And with the war of Russia against Ukraine, which started already in 2014 and not only now, I think we started to think about how to adapt our academic infrastructures. And now, as we are all of us are confronted with a terrible situation, but in Armenia, I won't compare our situation with yours in Armenia, which is really terrific. But we concluded in the Max Weber Foundation that that is important to keep this big institution, which has a quite bilateral orientation, but in an international context, but to create offices in the so-called peripheries of the empires, which should do more research on the perspectives of the so-called peripheries towards the imperial centers. And that's, I don't, the empires, I mean, the Soviet Union was also an empire. And we started this year in opening up an office in Georgia, in Tbilisi, but this office is not only meant to serve Georgian purposes, but also for the other Caucasian countries. And I think Armenia is particularly important by this. And I am so glad that today we started to create partnerships and to think about future cooperation. Helena is a fellow actually at our office in Tbilisi, and David Shishkeriani is a researcher at the new office, which is even not officially opened at the moment, but we try to struggle with administrative stuff at the moment. The office in Tbilisi should serve to concentrate on 3 or perhaps 2 research pillars. The one would be research on the Black Sea region, and the other one should be the broad topic between the empires. And this gives us the opportunity not only to work together with the other institutes and offices of the Max Weber Foundation, for example, the Institute in Warsaw, and we have an office in Vilnius in Lithuania, but to bring in partners from the countries where the Max Weber Foundation is active. We have research fellowships. Perhaps some of you already have heard about this, because we had already a lot of researchers from Georgia and from Armenia in Moscow, because we had a special scholarship which was meant to give scholars from the states, from the ex-Soviet Union, to do research on their proper national history in the imperial archives in Russia, that means in Moscow and St. Petersburg. But this kind of scholarship is not possible anymore, and I will touch the problem of archival research a little bit later. But we will create a scholarship also for the Caucasus region and for researchers from Armenia and from Georgia. But we will send you the call that you will be there, and we can give you some information and organize events where we give more information about our future programs here in Tbilisi and also in Armenia. The offices of the Max Weber Foundation, they should do research by themselves, but they should also create international networks of researchers. I think that research is never a national thing and endeavor, but it should be international. And when we create an office here in Georgia, it's always meant to put to give the opportunity to do research on the topics I mentioned in an international context. I think that this would be very important. I'm very glad that with Oliver Reisner we have such a prolific partner in Georgia and Tbilisi that helps us very much, because neither me nor Andreas Hilger, who is the head and the director of the new office in Tbilisi, and who unfortunately today today was unable to be here. But we are very, very glad that we have Oliver Reisler, and who is the real expert on all matters of Georgian history and even actual political developments. Yeah, now I will come to the problem of archives. For all of us, but for Western researchers, it is not possible at the moment to go to Russian archives. And I think that this situation will last at least until the war ends. And this can be for a very, very long time. And this is a big problem for research if you're doing research on the Soviet Union and on the imperial period, even if you do research on the periphery, to not have access to the central archives. This is a big problem, and with this problem, all of us have to cope in some way. For you, it is easier. I know that Georgian researchers now can go to the central archives in Russia, and the Russia's archives are open, but you can't. The mobility is restrained for Western researchers, and that's why they can't go there anymore. But I think that it's very, very important for Western researchers to explore the archives in the successive states of the Soviet Union, as Armenia, as Georgia. I know that everywhere we have problems of access. That's a big problem. In Georgia, it's obviously a big problem. I think in Armenia it's a little bit better. But I think it's very important that we jointly confront this problem, because it's very important, and I think it's particularly true for periods of great stress, that we know the more we can know about Russia, about Ukraine, about Georgia, about Armenia, and so on. And I think that in the future, and I am quite ambivalent on this issue, a lot of researchers from Western countries will come to Georgia and to Armenia. Perhaps they are numerous, and I don't know if this is, or even for you, would be a very, very easy task to tackle these kind of corporations. But I think that is an issue we should discuss about with you. And that's, perhaps I will stop here. And if you have any question, or if Helena thinks that I should add something, or Apina, please don't hesitate to ask questions. But what I would like to add, I'm now creating a kind of network inside the Max Weber Foundation, which is called Max Weber Foundation Network Eastern Europe and Eurasia. And that's it's a kind of network between the institutes, and I'm very happy that Christoph Neumann, who is the director of the Oriental Institute in Istanbul, which is an institute also of the Max Weber Foundation, and he will be a very important part of the network. And I think this is also important for Georgia and Armenia, because he's the expert for the Ottoman history and modern Turkey. But now I will stop.
Thank you, Sandra. I would like to continue with the statement of Oliver. Oliver, as Sandra already mentioned, you have long-standing experience when it comes to networking between Georgia and Germany, and you build a lot of bridges and keep building a lot of bridges. In many ways, you're providing a link between the Caucasian countries and German scientific institutions. So could you share your insights on your most successful experience and perhaps the greatest challenge in this regard?
Yeah, these are, I would say, if I start with a summary. It's worlds apart. Yeah, so and the question is really how you talk about infrastructure, then how to build a bridge, since as one of the few German historians in the field of East European history that really took the risk in the 1990s to learn Georgian and to focus on the history of the Caucasus, was there were not many people really to interact with, and of course also in Germany, where the area studies are very much focused on the philological traditions, yeah, so Turkic studies, Iranian language and Iranian philology and so on. The Caucasus was very marginal. Yeah. So of course with Armenian language it's a little bit different, but in general I would say that it's quite a challenge. Then we had also that several chairs that were dealing with the Christian Orient in Munich, for example, were closed down. So there is only Caucasian studies at the University of Vienna that already started during the GDR period, with a focus on linguistics that also was continued until today. We have the Meshrop Mastod Center in Halle-Wittenberg. We have, of course, the library, University Library in Halle-Wittenberg, that is especially collecting books and publications from this region. Volker Adam is in charge of this. Yeah, so that really I was overwhelmed when there was the interest so much growing after the Russian attack on Ukraine. Yeah, so and the question is really on the other side, we have academic traditions, especially in history. I'm talking on as a historian. There are the success stories are more in other disciplines, I would say. That there are the traditions focusing on national history, history as a legitimatory science, so discipline that was legitimizing political claims, and a very not so much really connected to the international academic discourse when I'm teaching at university, history students also. So really they are struggling really to work with concepts, with theories, acquiring really knowledge about ongoing research in other parts of the world that might be very helpful and interesting to be applied to this region. Yeah, so in my research, of course, I'm trying. So being based in Tbilisi, also really to grasp the diversity that is available in Tbilisi. So also with Armenian history in Tiflis and so on and so forth. So we had one experience, one collaboration that was funded by German Volkswagen Foundation with University of Bochum about the Great Terror in a small Caucasian republic in Georgia. And this is where Bernd Bonwetsch, who was the founding director of Max Weber of the German Historical Institute in Moscow, and Mark Junge really tried really to work in the KGB and party archive on this sensitive period that was not really well researched so far. Yeah, so the Soviet period is very much, I do not know how it is in Armenia, a non-time. So there was Democratic Republic of Georgia, then was Soviet occupation, and then history continued with the end of the Soviet Union, with the regaining of independence in 1991. And as if there was no changes in this period. Though there is also in historiography a strong stance on political history, events, and so on, not so much a social history that is totally vanished, at least in Georgia. I would very much look forward also from Armenian, if what is there, and on ongoing research, because there's a little in the region, little communication and exchange about research projects and so on. So yeah, so here I'm then very much looking forward to networking and bridge building from the Max Weber Foundation that might really allow for having joint workshops, maybe on methodological, on conceptual issues, really how to bring the interesting research, what we also learned about during the last few days, really how to connect it with the international academic discourse. One last point maybe, what I also realized is, again, so mainly with my experience with Georgian historiography, there is very little on epistemology. So on how the political environment really impacts on the production of historical knowledge. In other disciplines, especially in anthropology and in old ancient history, there is more, and in archaeology there is much more cooperation ongoing. So therefore I would not stop with such a bleak or pessimistic point. Really, for more than 10 years, really, the University of Marburg, Stefan Voel, is having these Caucasus conflict cultures workshops that were regularly conducted in Georgia with participants from Armenia and also from Azerbaijan, much less, but at least there was this, and jointly working on research projects together. And I think this might be some example, but could be for the discussion also something for historians really to overcome this national container view and to try to identify the interactions in cultural and so on. And maybe I will stop here for the moment.
Thank you. Let's continue with Andreas. Andreas, you are the chair of Germany's only Lehrstuhl, so the little department for Russia-Asia studies. So it's not Eastern European history, but it's a designated Russia-Asia studies chair. Maybe you could share some thoughts of integrating the Caucasus into this broader field and how an approach from this perspective would differ from Caucasology, what Oliver mentioned in Jena.
Thank you for being here and for inviting me to this discussion. It is actually not a department, a chair of Russian Asian Studies. It's a history department, so it's a completely history thing. And I am by training historian of Eastern Europe, but actually of Russia. And I got this chair. One member of the commission is actually here because I was doing Russian Japanese studies. So I was studying Russia from the periphery and not from the center. So this is a tradition which is already old. So now we have a discussion and said, we have to turn to the periphery and decentralize Russian history. But this has been done since the 1990s. Oliver mentioned, you mentioned Kapela, who actually was one of my supervisors of my PhD dissertation. So there are many things are being done in our generation. What is new, of course, that we go to the periphery now, to the archives and to the institutions, because we cannot go to the center anymore. But maybe I can add a few words about Russian Asian studies, which was the beginning of your question. It's not defined, actually. And when I had this job interview, we talked about what is Asia for me or for Russia, and I was trying to answer on a cultural level and say it's all constructs like Asia and Europe, but they actually wanted to denominate the chair. And eventually we excluded the Caucasus. So we did everything very traditional way, east of the Ural Mountains, and this has to do with the structure of the history department because we have expertise in Russia, in East Central Europe, but somehow the Caucasus was overlooked. So I never did Caucasian history. I, for the first time this semester, taught a seminar on Caucasian history, which is extremely exciting, but I'm not an expert. So what can I add? Obviously, no expertise as an historian, because I speak none of the languages which I would need here, but I, of course, am ready to add the Caucasus to the field of our studies, and we have several foci, that's my interest, Japan or Russia and Japan and the Pacific and the Arctic, but Helena did Central Asian history, now moved to the Caucasus. So it's not a great thing to include the Caucasus in future studies of dissertations. The other thing we can do is, of course, to build infrastructures. So we didn't, we partly talked about it today, that there are things like academic infrastructure, and this is, of course, an important thing where we can contribute by organizing workshops, by inviting students, PhD candidates, colleagues to Munich, and just build, strengthen this network, which we have started to build during the past few days. On a conceptual level, well, I don't have nothing particularly new to offer, so that's comparative history. We can compare the Caucasian periphery with other peripheries. Where are colonial structures? How do they differ? So the ways of integrating or not integrating the empires, causing resistance. This we can do, and on more important thing is maybe to study interconnections between different peripheries of the empire. So not only to study now the national containers, but the South Caucasus, how it was related to the Ottoman Empire, to Persia, or the Caucasus, the Caspian region. So these are things we have been doing for other regions, and I think we can easily do it for new regions. But we need the expertise of colleagues from the Caucasus, because I at least, I'm quite sure I won't learn neither Georgian or Armenian. And having been here for several weeks, I'm very sure I will never master it. So it's more on a conceptual level, building infrastructures and offering help and yeah, resources.
Thank you. Or to analyze connections and entanglements between the Caucasus and Baltics and the Pacific regions, which are also very much under-researched. Thank you, Andreas. I would like to continue with Wachram. We would like you maybe to introduce in a few sentences the AUA, which is kindly hosting us today. And we would like to ask you about your institutional cooperations with American institutions. How do you estimate the influence of AUA on Armenian academia and also Armenian society, maybe, as a follow-up?
Okay, thank you. Before I start, I just want to reflect on what Sandra told at the beginning, because the way of moving Max Weber Foundation to the Caucasus is all about the Ministry of Infrastructure. Because what was happening for the last 200 years, people from organizations and embassies would come to Tbilisi, find the local infrastructure very attractive, and not moving to Baku or Yerevan. So your case is more or less the same. So finding Tbilisi very attractive in terms of infrastructure. So American University of Armenia, this place, was established in 1991, on the same day as Armenia declared its independence. And for the last 32 years, this university has grown quite a bit. So this very building that we are in was built 15 years ago, but the main building was over there. We can have a trip there, and that building used to be the headquarters of the Communist Party of Armenia, and it's an irony now that the American University is occupying that place. So this university, until 2013, it had only graduate programs, and starting from 2013, we have opened our undergraduate programs, and now we offer 8 undergraduate programs and 11 graduate programs. So the student population is 2,200. We have just purchased a piece of land. We are going to build a new campus just a few meters away, and the university has plans to grow and to have students up to 4,000 students in 5-10 years. So unfortunately, we don't have a PhD program yet. That has been in the pipeline for many years now, and the university administration is working hard to try to put that into the implementation phase. So once it is done, of course, the research component is going to increase. However, for the last, I would say, 7 years, the research has become another buzzword on campus. And, and researchers, we have around 80 full-time faculty, and a small part of this faculty publish in reputable journals, which we consider good reputable journals. And but however, in terms of publications, AUA, the small university, is number 7 in the country. However, in terms of impact, we are number 3 in the country, and we're very proud of that. So we are, which means that whatever our scholars produce are impactful, and they're not producing research just for the sake of producing research. That being said, I think what I wanted also to say that this is a third event happening this year that we are hosting, if I can say, delegation from Germany. We are not delegation, but somewhere similar to that. In July, we hosted a delegation from Germany, from the Federal Ministry of Education was here. So we had a discussion about the ways we can collaborate, and there were some great ideas. We'll see how that goes. And now, American University is also the only university that is licensed by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, which makes us quite, which puts us also on the map of the U.S. educational infrastructure, and our diplomas are acknowledged in Europe and also in America. It's also part of the University of California system. It's the only campus that exists outside of University of California. So from this perspective, we are in a very good starting positions. Now, as research starts to, as we hire more and more full-time faculty, research is becoming one of the requirements for full-time faculty. And so from that perspective, I think there is great deal. We have exchanged programs with Freie University only that we sent our undergraduate students, especially from politics and governance program. Undergraduate students are benefiting from this. But I would love very much to deepen our cooperation on research areas. Suran Manuki and my colleague here, and then he's also a historian, Naira Sagan, that you also met. She didn't come. Okay, so we are historians working more or less in the area that in the period that will be very much interested. We don't have a history department yet, but it's in the making. We have created it's in the making. We are creating a minor in history. Hopefully it will become a program. That's my dream, at least. But I'm also, by training, I'm a historian, and there is a great need in this country to develop history from scratch, history studies from scratch, not based on the legacy of the Soviet very constrained conceptual framework that has disabled at least 1.5 generation of Armenian historians, but from a new conceptual perspective. And unfortunately, Yerevan State University has done some job, but not to the extent that could meet the requirements of the time. Now, that being said, I think what I want to conclude is by saying that working with Georgian universities is very important for us, and I'll tell you why. Until now, what was happening between Armenian scholars and Georgian scholars was mostly through foundations, mostly German foundations. What I have to say, if we could link between university to university, that can be much more sustainable, and that can serve the purpose of doing research. So that's about it for now. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this deep insight. So I would like to switch now from an institutional level, where we had 4 representatives, to a more individual one. And I would like to ask Edita, you have been working on the international visibility of Armenian scholarly journals, including the scientific diaspora role. What challenges would you highlight in terms of publishing abroad and research visibility? And what role do you ascribe to academics in the diaspora?
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. If I may start with describing a bit the scientific landscape of Armenia, so everyone here understands with what we are dealing. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union and Armenia regaining its independence, a lot of scientific ties and scientific traditions were inherited from the Soviet time. And unfortunately, we still have scientific disciplines which are working, let's say, so-called Soviet-type versions, and this relates basically to social sciences and humanities. Like during the Soviet period, physics, chemistry, and in some point biology, they were the most productive scientific directions, but again without any foreign cooperation. But these disciplines that they are now like on the top of scientific disciplines in Armenia, they were able to break these ties, the Soviet traditional approach to science as well, and they have developed scientific cooperation with European, US, Eurasian organizations. This was done on both organizational level and also on individual level. But we have a very poor picture in social sciences and humanities. And if we consider the publications from Armenia that are in the journals indexed by scientific databases such as Web of Science or Scopus, social sciences and humanities are on the lowest level, very low. We cannot compare them with the physics, which is the highest one. So we have, because our science policy is changing now, this is for several decades already, asking our scientists to be more international, to cooperate with their with the international scholars, try to build the links, and also to publish their papers not in Armenian and not in Armenian language journals, because the work they are doing and they are publishing is not visible to international community. And so the center I'm working in, it's like doing some scientific research in terms of quantitative research, like we are mapping the scientific field of Armenia, individual scientists and also institutions, trying to see what links, what ties do they have with foreign counterparts and so on and so forth. So just for your knowledge, there are 122 journals that are published in Armenia. And we have some 3,000 researchers now working, and you can imagine this is too much. And the majority of these journals, some 60 to 70%, are in social sciences and humanities. They are publishing some abstracts or some articles in English, in Russian, or in other foreign languages, but these are some very few, and they actually do not impact on the international science. So the Armenian scholars in social sciences and humanities, they are invisible to the world. So when we were trying to figure out what scientists have publications in this Web of Science and Scopus databases, we could count them on our two fingers. Like, we know them personally, and one of those scientists is like sitting next to me, and everyone knows Bahram because he's publishing abroad. So this is something we are discussing also among our staff. And so what was the result that we published in international journal? Do we want like our scientific community to be shocked with the results that the publications that we counted in those journals, they have some 1,697 citations in the Web of Science and Scopus. This means that starting from Soviet period, because there were journals that are publishing starting from Soviet period until 2022, all our scientific journals and article published there, several thousand articles published there, have received only some 1,500 citations. And the majority of these citations were on the journals on biology, and on the second level, the journals on social sciences and humanities, because the topics covered by these disciplines are very important. There are topics which could not, the research could not be done by foreigners. There need to be Armenians to do this research, and they are doing it, but because they are publishing in Armenia, their results are invisible to the public. And we have studied also one very important component of our research community. This is the diaspora that Armenia has. And we have studied the scientific diaspora, which is like another part of diaspora of Armenia, trying to see whether those journals that are published in Armenian are at least read by scientific diaspora, because some of them, not all, of course, are reading Armenian and they could understand. And actually, this was a very, very little amount, very, very little share. So unfortunately, even trying to understand how this scientific diaspora can help us to overcome this issue and like make our research more accessible, we have failed also in this respect. And just to have I'm not sure if everyone has an idea what the scientific diaspora consists of. We have 3 waves of people who left Armenia. The first wave, this was after the Armenian genocide, where a lot of Armenians were survivors of the Armenian genocide. They moved to different European countries. And we have scientists who were born and raised in Europe, in US, and some of them, they don't speak Armenian. The second wave was after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when because of the economic and social conditions, a lot of scientists left Armenia. And if we compare the number of scientists during the Soviet Union and then after Armenia regains its independence, we have 3 or 4 times less scientists now working in Armenia than we have during the Soviet Union period. And the third wave, it was in 20s and early 20s, when the scientific ties with foreign institutions and foreign organizations started to boost, because we now have a lot of opportunities to go to study abroad, to do PhD abroad or postdoctoral research. So we have another brain drain from Armenia, unfortunately. And now the policy of the State Committee of Armenia is to try to include as much young people as possible. They have increased the salaries. Of course, they are not comparable with the salaries in Europe or in America, but these are the steps to enable some young people to be involved in science. And there are some disciplines which are, I will mention that social sciences and humanities are among them, that young people are not interested. They are more going to IT sphere or physics or chemistry, because they are developing very rapidly. They are building infrastructures, they are signing agreements with different organizations, and like government is also investing in building these ties. From 212, when the State Committee of Sciences was established in Armenia, they have signed some 120 international agreements with different governments and organizations. Now we have scientific agreements with all SIS countries, and we also have a lot of agreements with EU countries. And based on this agreement, some grant calls are being issued by the State Committee, and this all is directed to building these ties and to enabling the Armenian researchers to become competitive and to I am stressing again, to publish abroad and to raise the visibility of our country. We have, for example, with Russia, we have 15 scientific agreements signed. from EU, on the first place is Italy. We have 6 agreements signed with Italy, and based on that, several grant projects are already being implemented. But again, in all these grant projects, like 99% of scientists are from the natural sciences fields, very few social sciences and humanities. There are special grant competitions now only for social sciences and humanities sector in order to revive the sector as well. But unfortunately, the results are still not a promising one. We have like institutions, for example, in the Academy of Sciences, the Institute of Ethnography and what? Archaeology, yes, I'm sorry. They are like considered to be the most productive institution in Armenia because they are publishing abroad, yes. But like history, for example, because as far as I understand, most of people here are historians, is the last one among the like levels. Yes, and I will speak because I am from the Genocide Museum. I will speak about this field as well. You can imagine how important the field is for Armenia. We have some scholars working at our institution. We have a lot of scholars working abroad, but we are only recently we have started like publishing abroad, publishing in journals, in the Web of Science of Scopus, and this is like individual initiatives. Like we still could not cope with this Soviet inherited methodology and approach to the social sciences and humanities, and we still need to work to like move through these barriers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was highly interesting. Maybe later in the discussion, Apine can add some of her views as a Armenian academic in diaspora. I would like to continue with Tamar. Tamar, as an early career scholar from Georgia, you might bring a slightly different, perhaps even critical perspective into the debate of decentralizing. So what challenges and also opportunities do you see in the turn of Western European academia turns toward the South Caucasus?
Okay, thank you a lot for inviting on this panel. It's great to have the opportunity to talk about this topic because it's not common that I have opportunity to talk and discuss what kind of situations are taking place in Georgian academia specifically for the young scholars like I am. I mean, I was tempted to start complaining about the precarious lifestyle I have, but this is different topic and it's like international rather than national. So right now, what is happening right now in general in Armenian and as well in Georgian academia is that we are having these two parallel processes when it comes to the history discipline. The one process is reclaiming the Soviet, the history from this kind of Soviet tradition, right? And finding ways and approaches and methods and language to write some kind of post-Soviet new kind of history, which is quite a challenging job because there are so many Soviet infrastructures which somehow drive us to produce with the same kind of approaches. So this is one important process which is taking place right now. And the second process which is taking place is revisiting this kind of traditional historiographical methodology and using these kind of critical approaches, right? Like, for example, the coloniality, post-colonial knowledge, and so on and so forth, right? And these two parallel processes are very important. And they somehow create the opportunity to produce new kind of history, the history not in the centers, but create the history in the peripheries, which is very important. But most of the time, what I have witnessed as a young scholar is that the peripheries are used as sites for the empirical research, which is important, of course, and I am myself doing a lot of empirical research, but most of the time when I'm invited to the international conferences, I'm asked to talk about the empirical parts only. No one expects me to discuss the theoretical, conceptual, analytical. I mean, most of the time, this is not, don't want to generalize this, but this is a tendency. And this runs in a short risk, right? It has some kind of risk that with this kind of influx of the Western historians and academics who want, and of course this is amazing opportunity for local scholars as well, to exchange and collaborate with Western researchers, but to have the Caucasus as the site of the empirical research and don't somehow cooperate and bring this kind of theoretical tools with this kind of interaction is problematic, to say in a very easy terms, right? So this is one important problem. So, and having this kind of, because as from my kind of experience as well, I only gained a strong theoretical frameworks and could somehow engage into this kind of modern conceptual debates when I become the part of this international doctoral program. Because before, and this I realized only retrospectively when I somehow had the opportunity to go to the Western academia and see and experience this kind of theoretical debate and engage in this theoretical debate, that I myself had to somehow penetrate the Western academia to somehow reskill myself with this kind of theoretical tools. So Georgian academia, as well as probably Armenian academia, faces this same challenge that, okay, empirical research is amazing, but I mean, where does the theoretical kind of conceptualization come from? Should it come from the West? Or shall we localize this kind of theoretical discourses and create this kind of discussion, right, and exchange between the theory and the empiricism? This is one thing. And another thing, when thinking about the risks, again, with these kind of changes and shifts from the center to periphery, and with this kind of influx of the Western academics in this kind of peripheral cities, countries, and regions, and conducting this research, empirical research, again, without engaging with local institutions, because also, again, like institutionally, the Georgian academia is so poor that it's very hard to organize some kind of structural infrastructural as well as institutional exchange, right? So there are no research institutes which has the opportunity to engage with the Western academics and to ask them to leave their kind of the parts of their kind of knowledge locally, which also gonna contribute to the local academic development, right? So there is three major risks which I see when Western academics would come and somehow start to research the archives. So first risk is to present the Georgian historical kind of experience as something that was a victim of the center, right? I mean, victimization is one major risk because many researchers, very interesting researchers, including Krista Goff and I don't know, Eric Scott and others, and recently Claire Kaiser also showed that the Georgians were not just only the subjects of the imperial power, but they were also agents, right? I mean, that the Georgians themselves had their own kind of orients, like a minority groups. So like seeing the Georgian kind of nation as on the victim of the imperial kind of power is a one major risk we should somehow try to avoid. Another risk is exotization, saying that the Georgian experience is something very exotic and unique. And this is, of course, obviously the risk. I won't go deeply into this. And another risk is somehow because I know so many researchers who come in Georgia and they just work with the Russian archives because of the language kind of, right? I mean, the language skills, they cannot work with the Georgian archives. And I can assure you that in Georgian language archives, there are so unique and important kind of perspectives which cannot be covered only in Russian archives, because the shifts, what kind of archives are in Georgian and what are in Russian, is very strategic, right? I mean, for example, from my research, I can tell that when Georgians wanted to make some kind of like official statements, they used the Russian language. But when they exchanged some kind of informal internal issues, they used the Georgian language when they knew that it won't be checked or something like this, right? So looking only at the Russian language archives in Georgian kind of archival institutions is the risk that it could overlook the Georgian perspective. So considering these three risks and considering this kind of process of this reclaiming the history from the Soviet and then from this kind of traditional historiographical tradition in combination creates this kind of some risks, but there are some opportunities as well, as I mentioned. So looking these opportunities, taking these opportunities seriously, and again, like overthinking this kind of way how we write and produce history would be important thing, an important caveat in the beginning of research studies. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for these very important, very strong claims, which I think we can discuss later, very intense. Yeah, thinking of infrastructure, there is a way, of course, to cooperate pretty well without traveling to the Caucasus, and that's via digitalization. So that's why we are very happy that Vahang could make it here. And so as an intersection between IT and humanities, digital humanities is becoming increasingly established also in Western academia, even a little bit slower than it may be the case here in Georgia and Armenia, so speaking about Periphery. So can you tell us, are there any established cooperations between IT and humanities in Armenia? What is the state of techniques and research there? And how would you describe the state of digitization in Armenia and its role in making research accessible more efficiently?
Thank you. So I can say a few words about background, which can help with understanding why exactly I say things about digitization, digital humanities. So we are representing an research triangle. Instigate Academy is a research triangle which tries to bring together the needs of the country or government with the offerings from academia and from industry, like managerial skills from industry. But of course, it's originally founded from high-tech perspective and natural sciences. And the humanitarian part or non-natural sciences part is relatively limited to pedagogical research because we are running several colleges and we have epistemological studies. We have sponsor some PhD programs in pedagogics, and recently also due to, as Mr. Martirosyan mentioned, also due to differences in philosophy of history in Soviet time and post-Soviet time, and let's say ancient times, even like. From my perspective, being a non-historian, the philosophy of history in Soviet time was that whatever Greek philosophers have been writing is more trustworthy than what Armenian historians, were writing, let's say in 5th century. That was essentially the bottom line of the philosophy of history in Soviet time. And each period has its own philosophy. Let's say, in the 5th century, Greek or Roman historians' philosophy was very different. Let's say it was driven by their imperial needs, And Armenia's philosophy was driven by its needs of not being divided between Iran, Persian, and Roman empires. And now, in post-Soviet Armenia, we need to understand, because we are educators, we are running a set of colleges and set of university faculties in natural sciences, but we run the full curriculum, including history, including literature. So we sponsor research in ancient Armenian language because we try to increase the portion of ancient Armenian in the even natural sciences usage of it. Also between Western and Eastern Armenians, this is the only uniting thing between these two ethnoses, sub-ethnoses. Basically, our postulate is that Armenian nation died when two nations were born, the Western and Eastern Armenians, which now like broken magnet, they don't want to, it's like Austrians and Germans. So you will have hard time bringing them together again as into one state. And so for us, as opposed to, let's say, Greeks with their ancient Greek, ancient Armenian also has a practical need, practical reason for being cultivated. So we sponsor, our research organization is sponsoring PhD studies, postdoc studies, also in the field of political theology, like relation of legal versus political, like state of force majeure, when the administrative mode should stop and political or law-making mode or exception-making mode should start, when you can declare a state of stop looking at the top level of contract, but look at the force majeure section of the contract, so to speak. These type of studies, which have been not very common, let's say, in curricula of Soviet time in universities. And since we're running curricula of several faculties, including some of, actually there is a faculty in AUA where our managers are involved, engineering sciences, and a few others. But the main reason we are so much interested in epistemological studies and philosophical is because we're also running set of colleges of the age 15 to 19, where it is the philosophy, the historic studies are of another functional. There is another need for like a functional purpose for history studies. We have a scientist in Germany, our partner, who is helping us with political theology studies. And to answer your question now from this context, first of all, in Armenia, there is, of course, Matenadaran, the Ancient Manuscripts Museum, which has been digitizing its contents with local efforts and with international grants to quite a high degree. Unfortunately, not, let's say, with the latest technology and not with because Armenia in general has a very good high-tech sector, but this high-tech sector is working for top companies of United States and Europe and Japan and so on, and it doesn't really get projects from here. Let's say average level engineers are trying to get jobs from government, and they have established their own environment. Even if we want to enter this environment, just not for financial reasons, but for helping, still you can have a hard time entering this area, which is still, even in the average quality, it still has high competition. We're trying now to help to improve the library management software with the National Library professionals, trying to understand their needs and potentially build a product that can be a worldwide product for library management. But overall, all these spaces for us is more like a donation space, not a money-making space. So it will be open source free software for library management. Working with the Mechtarist, so-called Mechtarist Center in Venice, trying to understand their needs for digitization and appearance in the internet, both in terms of publishing, in terms of maybe even podcasts or other types of modernization. So with the recent development in the artificial intelligence area, like maybe you've also heard of ChatGPT and so on, of course now it is opening much more prospects for technology to be used and maybe shut down some jobs also in your sphere. But at the same time also bring in need for new type of jobs, which is like shepherding that artificial intelligence for your needs. I think there's a lot of perspectives, and to conclude, I would like to mention that our institution has experience with bringing in students from Europe, mainly in the natural sciences field, engineering, but as I said, we're now partnering with the political theology researcher postdoc in Germany, and we're open to two types of partnership with European scholars. One is to just general student exchange programs, which we have experience with. Second is partnership between IT. We run a set of IT colleges and faculties. So if a historian history study and IT study can be combined together, or you have such interest, then from our side, of course, IT in this case would serve mainly instrumental role. Therefore, we could, for example, combine a bachelor's IT bachelor's program with the PhD program of a historian to help together to make some product in the field where the digitization and modern technologies could help with the historian studies. So this is more like, it's very different from regular student exchange. It's about interdisciplinary research, but not PhD, but more like PhD with a college student or PhD with a bachelor's, because IT in this case would mainly serve an instrumental role.
Thank you so much, because for every infrastructure, of course, there's a need of resources and of financing. And if I add some thoughts on international and artificial intelligence, I think that can integrate academia of Georgia, of Armenia, and of other non-English speaking countries pretty well, because with ChatGPT and other programs on improve English or translate into English, you don't have this barrier anymore to access to international journals, where you either have a very fluent or very well written skill or the money to have your text lectured. But now with this artificial intelligence, I think it would become much easier to get access. So Adita, I think it's for you also a very important point. So now I would like to give our panelists to respond, if you like, shortly to each other, so we can have an open discussion afterwards. Oliver, you are the first.
Yes, so one important information. So we have at our Ilya State University, we have a PhD program, Digital Humanities, where I'm also teaching, also for historians, but also for linguists and so on. Might be then good also to share possibilities and so on. We have several databases that we put, epigraphic database, prosopographic database for historical actors and so on. And this might be something really also online editing for voluminous diaries. Yeah, so why not? And this gives a plenty of new research opportunities. Yeah.
When Oliver and Andreas were talking about the cooperation, I think one of the ideas that we can cooperate is on serving on dissertation committees. It happens so that Armenian scholars have been mostly left outside of this university PhD defense committees, and although I have to say that, for instance, at AUA, the entire promotion of our faculty happens according to U.S. standards. So a committee is formed, and it's the work of a candidate is sent out to scholars outside of Armenia. A due process is done. So for instance, I don't. In the Soviet time, it was quite common that Georgian scholars would come to Armenia for defense, or Armenian scholars would go. Azerbaijani scholars would come to defense. Azerbaijani scholars, I don't think they will be coming or will be going there for any time in the near future. But I mean, in the Georgian part, I think we can really work on the humanities, social sciences. I mean, in our field. So something to consider also is your university. Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, that would be a one-side direction because in Germany, your supervisor is your only or is main head of your committee and your employer. So we don't have a separate committee. In Georgia, you do, but not in Germany.
Yes, but also what we have with Göttingen, this double degree, this is a special approach from our university for internationalization and for increasing the quality of research, where the PhD student like Tama has to write her PhD in English, so that's for two sides accessible, but really has to fulfill all the requirement for the PhD program in Georgia at Ilya University and for the PhD program in Göttingen. Therefore, then she will receive 2 diploma. Yeah, the only thing is one is to write one PhD thesis, and this is something possible. And I see Gebhard Heul is here, so the DAD also has support possibilities really for such kind of co-tutelle, how it is called. Yeah.
Maybe I can add something. Well, it's not impossible, but it's a bit bureaucratic, and I would be happy to switch to the American system with our PhD program, but this is a long way. What is possible if you have a special topic like Armenian or Georgian history, then we can actually include a specialist from Armenia or Georgia, but it always has to be approved by the faculty council. But it's not impossible, but it's good. And the other thing Oliver mentioned is a joint degree, which is a long way, because it had to be double degree or joint degrees. We have their joint master degrees, or used to be between the Vishka in Moscow and Constance University, for example. This needs time, but well, why not? But I think more practical summer schools, maybe in Yerevan and Tbilisi together. So this would be for the near future. Yeah. But I'm very open.
And of course, Erasmus programs, like not only this individual Erasmus Plus, but as an established connection between 2 universities. So, for example, between LMU and AUA, which makes it for interested students easier to go as an individual application to Erasmus Plus is.
Edita, Itamar, thank you very much for your comments and the purposes you brought forward, because I think that David agrees with me that we, as the Max Weber Foundation, we have to talk to you how we wisely construct our programs in the future, because I think that it's Tamara, it's very important that you that's a danger, the victimization of the periphery. I think we are turning the problem topside down, because the new imperial history that was more the focus was more on the flexibility of of empire, the integrative capacities of empire, and now it's all on violence and on victimization, and perhaps that's also a perspective which is not very proper, and it comes from a perspective, a political need in Germany now, and perhaps. But I think that it would be very important to have a counterweight against this. That's for us, for Western researchers, when they come to the region, and I think that at this point, researchers from Armenia and the cooperation and the constant contact with you would be very, very important to, 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 to to remind the Western colleagues that is probably not a proper, also not a proper perspective. But when it comes to creating infrastructures, fellowship programs, summer schools, inviting guests to enable cooperation between Georgian and Armenian scholars or institutions. I think we are very much dependent on you, because you better know what to do in a situation. And when I heard Edita, I was thinking, oh, that's a very desperate situation. That's a vicious circle, and it's very difficult to come to escape from this. But that's why we need to talk and to develop together programs which are good for Western researchers and for also for you, and that we talk to each other and have a very an exchange on these topics.
Yes, please hold this like this. Like this. Okay. Oh, okay. I try my best. So far, well, thank you to all the panelists. This was so much inspiring input, and I have filled my pages with a huge amount of questions and remarks. So I will try to pick only very few. Maybe I start with the thing that one of the things that I found most important. Tamar, you raised the issue. And I was very happy to hear that when you raised the issue of languages. This is something I try to establish in my old field of study, Ottoman history, over and over again. For decades, I'm talking without really being heard. Everybody says, yes, yes, of course, but unfortunately, I will never be able to read Armenian or to... Yes, but looking at the landscape of Anatolia and the history of Anatolia, you can reasonably not do anything, close to the history of many locations in Anatolia if you are not reading Armenian. So this has, like every European historian, has to come out of his or her comfort zone. This should be very clear. And for Caucasus, it's the same, and you put it very, very convincingly in characterizing the archives. Looking at Russian language archives is not enough to study Georgian history, full stop. So somebody who wants to make a contribution to Georgian history has to learn Georgian. Otherwise, that would be, and that is very common but bad practice among Ottomanists. Like many Ottomanists come to the Ottoman state archives without even knowing Ottoman, hire a few little Turkish students for little money, send them to the archives, sit oneself outside in the nice tea garden, and then write in splendid and very, very elaborate English a wonderful analysis on the basis of non-knowledge. Whereas here in the regions, we have the expertise, like language skills, and here comes the next problem that the last speaker raised. Do we, allow me to put myself into the group of Armenian historians who use Armenian sources, do we really evaluate our own sources? I see exactly. So, this you pointed out, but we should start doing so. I started with my colleagues a project, Hushamadian project, where our aim was to put the Armenian language sources in the center and say these have value and these contribute to history, and we will start understanding Armenian and Ottoman history completely new if we finally start using Armenian sources. So what drives me crazy is, please, Armenian colleagues, in all your desperate situation, start using Armenian sources. But I experienced over and over again, this is now the structural point. I see the Armenian students who try to come abroad, who try to be visible abroad, and to do so, they feel they have to use the non-Armenian sources and diminish their being Armenian because that's the vicious circle. So we have to turn around and say, our starting point is the Armenian sources, and we have to find way how to evaluate Armenian sources. Learn classical Armenian, learn Western Armenian because the sources, learn classical orthography. I'm sorry. There is an issue of orthography among Armenians, because in Soviet Armenia the orthography was changed, and that of course makes difficult to read the Armenian sources even if they are in modern Armenian and not in classical, but it is an issue. So we have to start to do that. And then that's only one point, and then still, yes, the own conceptual issues are there. But I wanted really to stress the immense importance of working with the local sources in the local language, especially when we have a language like Armenian, which is a very, very ancient written language, more ancient than all of the other imperial languages. So I restrict myself to this one point of my catalogue. Thank you.
Thank you. I try it this way. Funny. Yeah, thank you so much. That was really inspiring, and as usual, if I come across Elke, I'm the one with a bad conscience because I did not manage, even if I had some initiative learning Armenian. And of course, it doesn't end with Armenian. Actually, one should also read Russian. One should also, of course, read French, something that is getting lost a lot, and Greek, and a few other ones. And if you are not Johann Strauss from Strasbourg, you don't know all these. He does. My point here is another one, and again, it's Tamar's intervention that I would like to add something. And she asked where to take the new methodologies from. And that is a very important question indeed. I can only reflect the experience of Ottoman studies in the last 40 years, 45 years. When Ottoman studies, and very much, I think, in contrast, for example, to Iranian history or other parts of Islamic history, have managed to become a more or less natural part of the historical discipline at large. So this Ottoman history is no longer as exotic as it used to be, far from it. And I, as an Ottoman historian, have little difficulties to get into dialogue with Europeanists, with Eastern Europeanists, and so on and so forth. and I'm received as a colleague generally without eyebrows taken up to the ceiling. But how did that happen? I think it's extremely important that Ottoman studies very early on, and basically at the very moment that two things came in conjunction. Number one was the debate on the book by Said, Orientalism, that was published in 1978. And the other one was the opening of the Ottoman State Archives in 1985. The first was a good opportunity to get rid of the essentialism that came with the idea of the Ottoman Empire as something Islamic, and that's it. And the second, I think, gave a good opportunity to link up with economic and social history, especially at that time, in the first decades. Um, and I think there was no breakthrough, but the development came to a relatively good stage at the very moment when that linking up to established disciplines in Western history or whatever it is was combined with a giving up of the understanding that Ottoman history is something completely sui generis, completely of one of its own. And this has something to do with Ottoman history and Ottoman studies becoming very international, so that Turkish nationalism, that was very dominant in Ottoman history and still is in most parts of Turkish academia, ceased to be of a large influence in international Ottoman studies. And the moment that even Ottomanists began to regard Ottoman history as something normal or something comparable, I think we can go along quite naturally, and as we do in the Max Weber Foundation. And I'm not sure how Georgian or Armenian, leave alone Azerbaijani history can ever manage that. But I'm optimistic that at least Armenian and Georgian historian can achieve something like that. But I think it is a two-part thing. First, linking up and giving up some old and for that you need an opportunity, whatever that opportunity is, giving up some old hypotheses that were basic, fundamental, and number two, then giving up this idea it's Georgian history. So it is something that is essentially connected to landscape ecology, nationhood, whatever it is. It's not. And yeah, this is what I wanted to contribute.
Thank you. Pina, you're the next. Do you have a comment?
I wanted to, I will limit my comment by one point because I know there are many other opinions and points. I wanted to respond what Edita said, maybe slightly turn it in a slightly positive way, because it is known, we all know that what you called brain drain is an issue for Armenia. This is a real problem, and this is not a new problem. We have been facing this for many years, if not to say many centuries. But there is another aspect of this. There are scholars, I myself, having worked on topics of academic migration, there are many other scholars working on these issues, like Annalyn Saxenian, I think. They have brought this concept of not only brain drain and brain gain, but only brain circulation, which means when a potential scholars, potential people, intellectuals are leaving the country and going somewhere else, they still have their connections in their home country, and then they can somehow make networks, they can make connections with their home country and their host country, and that for this brain drain can turn into brain gain, and this is what she calls a brain circulation. So maybe I would formulate this as a question. When you say that you are trying to include the Armenian diaspora and maybe use the potential that is in abroad, my question would be, how are you doing that? How are you reaching out to, are there, like you find out there are specialists in specific fields and then you ask them to collaborate, you are inviting them to teach at Armenian universities, or maybe you can, I don't know, find some ways to send Armenian students and scholars abroad to collaborate with them abroad. And this would be the second part of my question. There is, of course, there are institutions like DAD and other institutions that are helping with fundings for Armenian scholars or students to go abroad and study there or do research. But are there some Armenian fundings institutions they are supporting this kind of like you want to write an article and publish this article in international journals that have impact, but you have to do research not only in Armenian archives. Armenian archives are very important and they are underestimated, there's no question there, but you also have to do some other work. You have also to look at other archives. You have to have this transnational and interdisciplinary perspective to be able to publish articles or other works that have impact. So I really would like to know what is the policy in Armenia.
Okay, thank you for your questions. I will try to answer them as far as I remember. You can just ask again. Okay, actually, our center, what we are doing, we are researching scientific ties. We are actually not inviting anyone, or we are not organizing any connections, but we are like monitoring. We are mapping the science of Armenia. Like we are looking into the ties between Armenian organization, and we are doing it through this Web of Science research. Like we are looking into the articles that were published because of collaboration between Armenian institutions and foreign institutions. So this is how we are working generally. And the second way we are working, we are looking into journals. Like, for example, we are taking the history discipline and we are looking into the articles published there. And in this way, we are also trying to find out Armenians in diaspora, because we don't know everyone working in diaspora. And we are creating databases in order to somehow create links between the Armenian scientists and the scientists are in diaspora. So there are very good connections, very well-established links between the scientists here and in diaspora in natural sciences again. So there is absolutely or a very, very few collaboration in social sciences and humanities. I cannot explain this phenomena because we have scientists in physics and we have also scientists in history. But I don't know why our historians here in Armenia, they are not applying to their diasporan colleagues, asking to help them. I cannot understand, I cannot explain this phenomena. Actually, I have some suspicion, but I don't want to raise it here. Okay? Our people, again in natural sciences, they are building ties with diaspora people. They are coming to Armenia. They are establishing departments here. They are leading institutions. So they are building infrastructure. They are also very well collaborating with their European and American, as I have said, without any American, without any Armenian descent. So we don't have any problems here. We have problems in social sciences and humanities, and especially in history. So what the government is doing, now they are doing a lot to build these ties. A lot of grant projects are being called by the State Committee of Sciences, now it's called Committee of Higher Education and Science, in order to involve foreign scholars, inviting them to Armenia to lead scientific groups or to build departments in order to somehow help people to be introduced to this methodology issues, and also what Tamar has said, like we have the same issues here. And with empirical research, everything is okay, but when it comes to analysis and theorizing everything, we are lacking behind. Like, if I may also speak about the Armenian sources, I can speak about the genocide studies in this case, because like we have this denialism for the Turkish sides. A lot of Armenians working here, they started using foreign archives in order to prove the Armenian genocide. Now, because we don't have this problem anymore, we are using Armenian sources and we are using it very well. Like, let's take also like the First Republic of Armenia. It is understudied. We have a lot of people working on this topic here, but because they are not publishing abroad, no one reads them. So again, they are picking like foreign sources in order to prove something. This is like maybe a secondary agent phenomena or syndrome, I don't know, trying to prove something based on the foreign archives. And maybe this is because the Armenian archives are underestimated. But again, if no one, like for example, a German scholar who is not reading Armenian, it's a very good start for cooperation, like working with the Armenian historian in order to write an article. It's a good start point for cooperation, but I don't know why it doesn't work either.
I have another question, perhaps to Edita and also to Tamar, because I think the policies of open access publishing is perhaps also a problem. This is a very, very good idea, but for a social scientist or a historian earning not much money and working at a very poor institution, it's very, very difficult to finance publishing. Because open access is nice, but it turns the financial Gewicht, how to weight burden on the researcher, and if you are working at a rich institution, this is not a problem at all because they have funding. But if you don't, this is really a problem, and I think this is a problem for researchers not only in Armenia and in Georgia, but in many other countries, and. Perhaps this is also an issue we should discuss. This is also about capitalism, about the enormous power these big publishing houses have now, and I think this is a problem which is of concern to all of us, and I think it's a very, very bad development, and it does not help researchers from Armenia, Georgia, or wherever to publish their works.
Answer to your question. Have I understood you correctly? You mean that we could not read articles because they are like closed and we need to pay, or we should pay to publish?
You should pay to publish.
Actually, I will disagree with you because like the majority of journals we are monitoring now, you are not paying to publish there. If you want it to be open access, yes, you have to pay. But if it's not an issue with publishing open access, actually, there are some journals who are taking money, but the majority of them, if they do not publish open access, they are free. Actually, you can publish free. And RP, I have forgotten to answer to one of your question about the going to different archives and money. Yes, it was an issue, but again, now these grant projects, they are quite big, and they also have some money for traveling and to participating in the conferences and also to going to different archives. So the situation has started to change. It will not change very drastically and very speedy, but I hope that it will at some point, because these grant competitions are being like called on a yearly basis, and the aim of the science committee is to invest this, how they say, nucleuses into different institutions to build like infrastructure and around those people who want to work, who are like fluent in English, who are working and they want to do international research. So there are some opportunities now which we haven't had before.
Thank you.
About normal? I don't normal like that, like yes, only direct. What about the equipment of libraries? Because that turned out to be a problem when I was teaching in Hungary. Like many of the books or articles I suggested to the students to read, they found a very small proportion of it, and I wonder about the equipment of university libraries or public libraries in Armenia now that many things are also digitally available, and so is everything available that could be interesting to read? And what is the purchase policy? And that could also be an idea for possible cooperation, because it's not only the matter of money, but it is a matter of, how can we share expertise and learn from one another without being this very paternalistic, one direction, the Europeans teach the Armenians and Jordans what to read and how to think. But there is an element of this that, and Tamar, you described it so beautifully, like what does it mean to be exposed to different modes of thinking? And this exposure has to come from some place. One is to make the work available, and this also already starts with, from where do I know as an Armenian librarian what to buy, what to purchase? So I need a cooperation or an exposure, or some Armenian scholars who come back maybe from having been trained abroad or participating, coming regularly to Armenia in the sense what you said, like brain circulation. I love that. Yeah, and also, taking into, like, for instance, people like me. I didn't leave from Armenia, but I'm also an Armenian Ottomanist, director of or Institute for Ottoman Studies. I can easily participate, but one has to find a mode for that.
Thank you. Now I have 3 speakers, Oliver, Andreas, and then Bahang. Yes, okay, please, then if the others mind, yes.
Unless the others are so for the publishing in general and availability of sources to researchers or even to students with low income, I have one advertisement to make of my new acquaintance. He's not even a friend, we just met only once on Zoom. So he made this website called armenianantilibrary.com. And here he is putting 2 bilingual books from basically one side is ancient Armenian, the other side is English. So he is deliberately diligently translating with his friend all the ancient Armenian, even translated literature, not original Armenian, because original Armenian is well published. But translated literature is not well respected by Armenian publishers. So like now I'm looking at Philo's Questions on Genesis, book 1, chapter 7, whatever. So there's philosophical or historical books published in 2 languages. Armenianantilibrary.com. And the word anti-library here has a very important aspect with everything we're discussing here. Like if these houses are very powerful, then anti-libraries and anti-magazines and journals should be published, should be created. In a computer science community, we have done it. The powerhouses like Microsoft and Apple, they have created this ecosystem where students couldn't purchase software tools for themselves. And Richard Stallman from MIT, he has come up with this general public license, GNU public license, and GNU or Free Software Foundation, where they said, we will collaborate together and create free software. So publishers could not only collaborate to publish in open access, but they could create their own open archives, open publishing websites together with the technical people. and publish in their own peer-reviewed systems and completely marginalize those publishers who are currently declared powerhouses. Of course, in computer science, we couldn't marginalize Microsoft and Apple, but probably today even you or everybody heard about Linux, which has not been some establishment in the past. But that came out of collaboration of universities who give to their PhD students and master students projects of improving Firefox web browser, which is open source and non-commercial. So similarly, the collaboration could be done there in the anti-library style. And another important aspect of it, with what you're saying, is he made it specifically like he was publishing books which cost only $20, selling it through his website to make sure that students in American universities who are interested in studies of Armenian, they could buy these books without a problem, because it's only $20, not $50 if he publishes it via powerful houses. Or 100, yes, exactly. And because those are sponsored by empires. Let's say today we don't have an ancient Armenian faculty inside Armenian Linguistic University, and we don't have ancient Armenian faculty in Yerevan State University. Azerbaijan has ancient Armenian faculty in their Linguistic University, and they have ancient Armenian faculty in their Baku State University. So state-sponsored publishing and filtered publishing of books is done with $100 books. So this guy is now publishing $20 books with the original Armenian history, so that students in USA could just buy the other side of it. That's it. Thank you.
Yes, so you already mentioned, so collaboration. I think this is really that we start to jointly collaborate in research and include so the public accessibility of the sources that we are using. Yeah, very often they are available maybe online, or at least that we calculated that it is included, that we create a database or something that is part of the results of a joint research project, that others can check how far really we made the right conclusions with our sources that we had. This is one, and also we open the opportunity that these sources become accessible for other research questions then. Yeah, and I think here is really a huge potential with this digital humanities, because more and more, because the archives cannot decide what is really worth. This should be then part of a research project, also teaching these institutions, centers of manuscripts and so on, how to work in a proper way. It's not enough just to put JPG files online, but really there is more. And this is what we can do. And here I think something what I took from our discussion, that we, when starting collaborative projects, leave the national level aside. Go micro, go global, go regional, but really leave these narratives, these national narratives out, and really find micro histories where it is possible to look into interactions, how infrastructures impact on a village, on a valley or on a landscape. Yeah, so I think this is a very good potential where we escape all these political assumptions that are behind. Yeah, so going on this self-testimonies, bringing the individual as an agent back into history. Yeah, so that's why I was so impressed by what you are doing there, because this is something very important, and what I'm really missing in this Soviet period historiography, and it has not been overcome because there are no agents. The people are not there, they are not acting there. Bringing them back, even in a village, women, so trying to identify what are the possibilities. And when we have the sources selected, of course, in the project, we cannot do all at once, then really we can analyze him in different ways and really try also to discover or discover those silent voices that are implicitly there.
I want to come back to what Thomas said about the victimization, exotization, and ignorance. Though I don't agree that writing articles together or learning language is the primary solution as a result, but we have to attract students to learn languages like Georgian and Armenian. This is nothing you decide easily, and to write an article takes a long time of cooperation. It's the result of a year or two. You find a topic, you find a way to learn together. I think the first step would be to attract scholars to write an article with a colleague from Georgia and Armenia, and to convince students that it's a good thing to learn Armenian or Georgian, which are not easy languages, not Italian we're talking about. It's very complicated. You learn it from a different perspective. So I think the first step is really to show students that it's a perspective, that it makes sense to learn the language, and it is, of course, a bit dangerous. So if you're a specialist in Georgian or Armenian history, you have not a better option on the job market. You shall be aware of this. So, and we must convince students that nonetheless it makes sense to do it. So it's not the result, but it's a result and not the remedy, I would say.
Maybe I can quickly squeeze in there. So, especially in Germany, we have the problems of limited contracts. So, what Tamar said now, I think many German researchers, like I am, we are very aware of that. But on the other hand, in Germany, it's fixed by law that we have a postdoc phase of 6 years. So, all the assistant professors are not tenured. We have to 4 years in the future, and in that time we have first to change our research topics radically from the PhD to the habilitation, and then we have this very, very fixed period which we can sometimes prolong to fellowships like I do now, and then we have to finish a second book on this very new topic. So a lot of researchers have become very desperate when Russian archives closed, and they had to find immediately new topics. And I think we spoke about infrastructures and temporality a lot in the last time. So a little bit of what Andrea said. Some collaborative infrastructures we can do now, and some will take years. So what we can do now is like talk to each other, establish or use the bureaus. But for languages in Munich, you can learn neither Georgian nor Armenian. I did my Georgian course in Berlin, and Felix as well, and in Jena. And Armenian, I don't know where you can learn Armenian actually. In Munich you can, okay, but at a Turkish institute, but not at the Sprachlabor. Yes. So it's at first you need like establish these courses and so on. And then what Andrea said, when you are speaking of like professorships in Eastern European history, so young scholars won't become a professor with a specialization only in Georgian and, for example, Central Asian. So you can't exclude Russian Empire or Soviet Union. So we have here, it's such a different academical system than in America. And there are so many conflicts of interest. So we really much have to deal with them as well in the upcoming years on a structural side. Okay. Christoph, you are...
Bit in this vein. We talk about uses of artificial intelligence, of computer networks, of anti-libraries, and so on and so forth. And of course, the internet as a very big technological system is open to different things. But in the last few decades, it has worked more towards widening the gap between poorer and richer countries, and of course poorer and richer academic communities. The Max Weber Foundation has decided that from now on all the publications should be done open access platinum grade, so that its publications are better visible in the world. So that's probably fine if you co-author something with a colleague from Georgia, because that the foundation pays for that colleague the fee as well, no problem. But you can see the dynamic, and this dynamic, of course, is multiplying because the content on the web more and more becomes property than rather free anyway, common, all these wonderful standards that we have, and of course we are aware of that. So it's not, and it's not something that many people are able to decide very freely, and as a community, as an academic community, at least in Germany, but also in Turkey. These are the two countries that I know best. Nobody, the communities have not developed strategies how to deal with that. And most of the researchers have the feeling that that they have to survive as individuals rather than in another way. What I would suggest, and that has something to do, the government of Iceland, which is a very small state, has given money to Google and to Apple, so that with regard to language recognition and language processing, especially in artificial intelligence, these big companies also take attention and include Icelandic, so that Icelandic literature is not be off the grid because Google Scholar and Google Artificial Intelligence and ChatGPT cannot recognize it and cannot make anything out of it. I think the best that one should do in Georgia or in Armenia is to fund language recognition and also OCR of handwritten text of manuscripts, perhaps in collaboration with the people doing Transcribus, that wonderful program, yeah? So that these sources become electronically processable, and then you see, I'm certainly born too early for that, but in 10, 15 years' time, we will have relatively reliable translations of these languages that have been processed, mass-processed texts in these networks from whatever text you have. Of course, one has to check things and so on and so forth. But I think this is something that needs to be done, can be done, but it needs to be done now, and it is certainly something that needs to be funded, government funded, with regard to these small national languages. I'm completely pessimistic about subnational language, Abkhazian, or something like that. I have no idea what is going to happen with sources than that. Assyrian, whatever.
Thank you. So the time is running. I have a last very brief remark by Sharik. And
so thank you. I was just thinking, since we are discussing very concrete steps of possible cooperations, some measures would not cost a penny, but it is a matter of, if we, let's say, define a project, a joint project with a collaborative project, there should be at least one sub-project where the job offer is formulated as such that Armenian or Georgian or Abkhazian or whatever small language is there should be a necessary requirement. And as we know from job offers for every given job. We always search a person who knows everything, including, you know, the dust of the moon. And we never find it. And then there is the issue of where do we compromise? And there should be at least one in the collaborative project that places the knowledge of a language first and makes compromises by possible, you know, other shortcomings. And this encourages scholars to evaluate their own languages, their own skills, and then develop additional skills. And then that may also encourage a young German scholar to learn Armenian. Why not? It is an Indo-European language. It's not a big deal to learn it. Not if I learned Arabic and Turkish and Russian and, you know, all of these languages from different spheres. It's not a big deal to learn a small language. The big deal in it is that the language is small and you think you can't build a professional career out of it. And that's partly a matter of definition. It is partly a matter of definition. Another thing is to encourage publications from, let's say, not necessarily co-author, because that requires a lot of time of each, you know, of us. Maybe we don't have the time. But if I am in the editorial committee of a peer-reviewed journal, or if I'm working in an institution like Max Weber Foundation and I have the means of, you know, platinum, I don't know what, then I can easily include an article of an Armenian or Georgian colleague, even if that article does not 100% but only 80% meet, and also sit and work and work on that article, spend a little bit more editorial work on that article, but include it and make it as such visible, and by working together also enabling that colleague to develop more and to take part in discussion, and whatever discussion one takes part, one has also something to learn, always something to learn. And the learning process is also vice versa. The more German, or we are talking now on Germans, you know, colleagues come to this region and see whatever questions preoccupied the society here. Like Armenia is struggling with the problem of negationism, denialism. Yes, so this infiltrated and is a very heavy burden on Armenian historical research. So, but this is something that maybe one or other German colleague has to learn and has to experience. What does it mean to be in an environment that struggles against denialism, that struggles against the Soviet heritage, and that struggles against the situation where the country itself is in an existential threat, and so we struggle also against the nationalism.
So yeah, thank you for this last comment, which is really important. And of course, I want also in the name von Apine, thank all of our panelists for being here, for sharing such very important thought with us. So our hope for these, more workshop than a conference because of our really bad timing, was to establish connections, to put Armenia and Armenian colleagues on the display of German and transnational research with a topic. We are thinking a lot about which topic would serve best and would also serve, obviously, our research interests. And we think infrastructure did it both. We had wonderful discussions about the history. And I think it's a wonderful starting point for all of us to discuss with a glass of wine, because the AUA was so generous to organize a small reception for us. And now it's the time to discuss collaborations and possibilities on a more personal level, and more important, act on them in the upcoming days, weeks, and also years. Thank you all for being here.